Hello, alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and welcome to the Pick Six, the podcast by the Attractions Group, where we bring you the latest and top stories from the attractions and amusement industry.
That's right, Don. And before we delve into this week's Pick Six, let me remind you, you can find us on all your favorite podcast apps, Apple, Google, Spotify, you know the drill. And you should check us out. Check out the YouTube version. It's a full video version. If you're watching that, then welcome. Please hit the subscribe button and follow us on X/Twitter at attractions_GRP. Don, what's the first story?
Well, fresh off the opening of the highly acclaimed Dolly Parton experience, Dollywood, located in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, has earned yet another prestigious accolade, reaffirming the exceptional quality guests can expect. The National Amusement Park Historical Association has released its 38th annual survey results, naming Dollywood the favorite theme park in the country. This honor, bestowed by experienced theme park enthusiasts, underscores Dollywood's commitment to excellence.
What do you think that is? What's about Dollywood that ranks them at the top of all these lists all the time?
I mean, just the way the guest experience is. I mean, everything, is a good experience. The culture there, from top to bottom. I mean, everybody buys in, and just every time I've gone, it's just a really fun and enjoyable experience. Everyone that I've encountered that works at the park, whether it's at the restaurants or the shops, admissions, the parking tolls, everything is just that down home country, welcome type feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on. I completely agree with every point you're making, but, and maybe it's cultural because it's the South or something, because that's the true South right there. It's like, you don't get more Southern living than that part of the country, but you get, when we talk about the declining customer experience, no matter where you go, not just at theme parks, a lot of people are like, well, kids these days, blah, blah, blah. Well, at Dollywood, it's only gotten better, So I think maybe company culture plays a lot into that. But also, we've had Dollywood on our various podcasts several times over the past year or two. And the thing that I've noticed is that I honestly believe that they are trying to do right by their guests. Well, a lot of other chains, and sometimes it becomes like a big corporate thing, and that's definitely a factor in this. But it's like, we got to sell them these season passes. All right, what are we going to do with these people? But with them, I really feel like they're trying to, like, we should add this because people will enjoy it, and then the money will come in that way, rather than how can we get an extra penny out of everybody, And I think that resonates.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that resonates too with those that vote for this is they see Dollywood, adding to the operating calendar, adding more events, and other places, they see, fewer operating days, fewer events, some of the rides opening later in the day and everything, and Dollywood just keeps moving forward.
Yeah, and Dollywood knows what they have. I've been regionally speaking in the local cities. I've seen billboards for Dollywood where I have not previously seen billboards for Dollywood. So they understand that they're a formidable force in this industry, in the entertainment industry. Forget the theme park stuff, because that they're not directly competing with any park that they're in the market with. But against all entertainment, they're a formidable force. And these poll rankings and stuff, I mean, I don't put a lot of credibility into, USA Today says they're the best park, so they're the best park, but I definitely see the marketability of it. And, they win over and over again, and that, it seems like it's catching people's attention. So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. We're heading to Walt Disney World. So the Walt Disney World Resort recently unveiled the on-ride point of view video from Tiana's Bayou Adventure. The attraction opens June 28th at Disney's Magic Kingdom in Orlando, Florida. This Princess and the Frog themed ride is a reimagined version of Splash Mountain and will feature a new band of critters, new characters, and dozens of animatronics. So they're on AP previews now. I think that started as of this recording today.
Yep, they're doing some of those. I watched the POV, which doesn't those never really do attractions justice. I think a lot of times when you see POVs, kind of mixed reviews. Some really impressed with it, and others feel that that there's just parts of the ride where there's not anything going on, just some blank space there. So, uh, I'm going to reserve judgment till I experience it myself. But so far, the reviews that I've seen online, social media, they seem to be mixed.
Yeah, same here. You've got the band. What do they call them? Pixie dusters, where Disney can
Yeah.
do no wrong. That are like, I can't wait till I ride it again. That kind of stuff. But it seems like a lot of the more objective people are saying that it's not a worthy replacement of Splash Mountain. Now, with that being said, I only rode Splash Mountain once, so I do not have that emotional connection to Splash Mountain. So I think that this ride has a fighting chance with me, because
Yes.
this isn't trying to fill a void for Splash Mountain like it would be for a lot of people.
And I'm on the opposite end, Ryan, where I do have lots of rides that I took on Splash Mountain, one of my favorite attractions at Walt Disney World. So I'm going to look at it a little differently than you do, but uh, the positive ones that I've heard, though, that's encouraging. And again, I'm looking forward to experiencing it myself.
Yeah, so it opens. I have it written down here, June 28th to the public. They're doing like cast member and AP previews and stuff like that right now. So I'll be out there. Probably, I'm definitely going in Labor Day, but I'm going to try to make it out there before that too. Anyway, that's enough personal information about me. What's the next story? I think you got the next one.
Well, we're sticking with the Walt Disney Company. The $17 billion development plan is set for a public hearing this week with the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which was appointed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The board will decide on June 15th whether to approve the plan, which would expand Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando over the next 20 years. So, could this be what everyone's been speculating, that if this gets approved, might we see a speculated fifth theme park?
Yeah. So most Disney itself, their response is incredibly weak to Epic Universe. They're like, we knew this was coming, so we added Avatar Land, we added Fantasy Land, we added Toy Story Land. That's great, but that all opened 5 years ago now, and you got a whole brand new park opening 10 miles up the road. So they're going to have to respond. Now, Disney, I wouldn't get too excited, because even if the plan was 10 years from now, in Disney terms, that's 25 years from now. But I've heard like rumors of like a villain theme park and stuff, but I don't know how they would centralize a fifth park. Like I can't think of, not necessarily an intellectual property, but like a theme that was different enough from the other ones that they could do too much with.
Yeah,
They've
well,
got.
that's what the speculation is. That they would use that money to add a fifth park, but I don't know if they have to. I think just each of the four parks they could just add so much more to those parks. Maybe that's what they would do. Maybe that would be the wise decision, would just be to build upon what you already have.
Yeah, but they have to do it right, though. I mean, because this Epic Universe stuff looks really good, and I like how it didn't even mention Epic Universe, but I'm going to throw that card on the table. But the Epic if that stuff delivers, and I think most believe that it will, if Disney does this stuff and they blue sky a bunch of stuff at D23, and then they finally build a few of those things, and the few of those things look nothing like the concept art and so on. I mean, Disney's always going to be king, but it's going to hurt a lot if Universal starts pecking away 1 or 2 days from people's vacations so they can go to Epic Universe. All right. Speaking of which, they're also not perfect, but so although it's still a year away from officially opening, Universal Orlando's Epic Universe has already had to rename one of its theme park thrill rides. Starfall Racers is now Stardust Racers. The name change was necessitated by a lawsuit filed by a school in Colorado of the same name that sued for copyright infringement. The ride will be located in the Celestial park portion of the amusement park. It's kind of funny because with copyright laws, basically you have to prove that whatever they're offering is similar enough that it would cause confusion with your product. So like if you had uh like Starfall Coffee Shop and I had Starfall Woodworking, like no one's going to confuse those two. But I think that a lot of it is the name doesn't really matter that much. They don't have a lot printed up, so they just decided not to fight that battle. That would be my guess. I'm not a lawyer though.
No, these things are going to happen too, and that's why it is incredibly difficult sometimes to name a ride. You'll see people sometimes question like how that's the best they could come up with. Well, sometimes it's hard just because you just look around the country. I mean, there are so many different, whether sports teams or schools or you know industry, whatever it is, someone's likely used at least something similar to that name. So it's very difficult, and it's not surprising, especially when you're starting a new park like this, that you're going to run into some of those issues where that name is in use somewhere else.
Yeah, and again, I think they could have gotten away with it, but I think they either A, chose not to fight that battle, or B, chose to not take the PR hit of fighting that battle, where they bullied a school out of their name or whatever. That's neither
Yeah,
here
and
nor there.
I don't mind Stardust Racers either. I think that sounds all right.
They should make a David Bowie theme, Ziggy Stardust. I'm just saying. Anyway, next story.
This is something that caught my attention. I think it would be a really cool event to attend, and it's Superman, Batman, Harley Quinn, and the Joker will be among the iconic characters taking over Six Flags Magic Mountain this summer during the new DC Heroes and Villains Fest. The festival will run on select Saturdays and Sundays from June 15th to August 4th, featuring character appearances, live shows, themed foods, and DC themed rides and attractions. The event will kick off with a DC superhero uh, cavalcade led by Batman and Wonder Woman. The excitement continues into the evening as the villains crash the Batman's 85th anniversary celebration show, adding an element of chaos and thrill. For those seeking adrenaline, the park offers the chance to join heroes like Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman in high flying adventures or face off against foes like Lex Luthor and the Riddler on various DC themed thrill rides. I think this is going to be really cool.
I do, and I like how it's a good use of intellectual property because Six Flags was as guilty as everybody else from like the 90s, where it's, let's put in a roller coaster. Let's call it Batman. Yeah, let's call it Batman. But this is actually using the characters, and the characters use their personalities and so on. So I'm cool with it. I think it's neat. I'd love to see it elsewhere.
What's next?
Next up, well, I guess it would be what's next down because we're talking about Top Thrill 2. So coaster enthusiasts hoping for a swift resolution to the issues plaguing Cedar Point's Top Thrill 2 may need to temper their expectations. On Tuesday, Cedar Point provided a brief update on the status of this record-breaking coaster, which was shut down just a week after its highly anticipated debut last month. The park's update offered little new information, saying Top Thrill 2 remains closed as Zamperla, the ride's manufacturer, continues working on a mechanical modification to the coaster vehicles. The park stated, "While we do not yet have a reopening date, we hope to provide more information soon. We sincerely appreciate your continued patience and look forward to the reopening of Top Thrill 2 as soon as possible." This announcement came just days before Coaster Mania, a popular annual event at Cedar Point celebrating the park's numerous roller coasters. Top Thrill 2, which debuted to the public on May 4th, was shut down May 11th, was intended to be the centerpiece of this year's event. What a nightmare situation for everybody. I feel bad for both sides, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of disappointment, obviously, with those that were planning to go to Coaster Mania. But at the same time, prototype ride, these kind of things happen. And it's not like there's nothing else to do at Cedar Point. You have some of the best roller coasters in the world there. You've got Steel Vengeance, Millennium Force, Maverick, Magnum XL 200, Raptor. I mean, plenty to see and do during Coaster Mania. Although, yeah, we understand that, the disappointment is going to be there. In terms of when this ride, may reopen or what the exact issue is, only Cedar Point and Zamperla know. So I guess the best thing to do, Ryan, would just be to grab a Snickers bar because it looks like it's going to be a while.
I'd rather do popcorn. But yeah, it's funny because like this announcement is so weird because it's worded almost identical to the original announcement, but they just changed the language to say Zamperla, the ride's manufacturer, is continuing to work rather than just working on it. So I can only speculate at this point, and my guess is one of a couple things. First of all, they were running some of the trains. I think people thought that it was testing for reopening. It seems like that was not the case. So maybe this is their way of saying, like, hey, we know you guys are seeing that. Don't get your grab a Snickers, as you would say. The other possibility is maybe this is their way of telling the Coaster Mania attendees as well as everybody else that, you know, it's not going to be open for Coaster Mania, as it's pretty apparent that it will not be. And then the other thing is maybe they planned on making the announcement of an opening date at this point, but the circumstances were not that. So they had to say something, and then they just kind of reiterated, we're still working on it. I mean, I can only speculate. I don't know for sure, but that's my guess. Because why else would you come out with a statement saying, like, still working on it? You know?
Yeah, patience is going to be required, you know, by those planning a visit to Cedar Point, the season pass holders, the enthusiast community. You know, it's a tough thing to ask, patience, but you know, it's going to, you know, take some time. They're going to figure it out, and you know, ultimately, it's going to reopen. I would just, you know, hope that, you know, everybody's not peppering, and I'm talking about media here, peppering Cedar Point like every other day, asking if they have an update. You know, and I know what that's like, you know, from my experience with Son of Beast at Kings Island. So hopefully that's not the case, that they're getting peppered like that, but they probably are.
Oh, they certainly are. I mean, part of it is like you got to make sure that this is a lesson in transparency in a lot of cases for the other times, because you know, if you have the veneer of being transparent, at least you know, the rest of, you know, when A, B, and C are said, then when something like this comes up, when it's like we don't have any news, people kind of believe you and they wait for it. But um yeah, I mean, Tony did go on the radio, and at least he didn't blow off the question. He was like, "Look, it's not going to be all summer, so there was news about that, you know. So it's going to open sometime this summer, which is a very, very blanket statement.
Runs
But
into September, doesn't it, for the summer?
it does. But to me, that's an assurance that it's not going to be closed all year. Like they're planning on opening it this season. Because to be honest with you, we weren't sure of that. There was nothing that indicated it would open this year until he said that, you know?
Yeah, the one thing we do know, Ryan, is that when it does reopen, it has to be operational from that point, or you know, it can't run for another week or two and then goes down again for an extended period. That cannot happen. So if I'm them, I take all the time that they need to make sure that it's going to be reliable and not have any, you know, long-term issues moving forward.
So, Don, when you were with Kings Island, you never had an experience where your new star attraction had problems like this, because all you built was P&Ms, which worked the first time. But do you think that this is a real pain point, or do you think that the general public doesn't care that much, like from the ticket sales and, you know, that sort of standpoint?
Well, I kind
And
of dealt with a little bit with the relaunch of Son of Beast with, you know, when they removed the loop and reopened the ride in 2007, and then, you know, a couple years later it went down. So I did have a little bit of experience with that. I was around Kings Island as a pass holder, 1981 when the Bat debuted. I was very excited about that, as was, you know, the enthusiast community at that time and the pass holders that they had. And, you know, that was a prototype ride, you know, very unique experience. No one had ever, you know, ridden a roller coaster, you know, hanging below the tracks before. And that had an abundance of downtime, long stretches where it wasn't operating. And I knew the frustration that the park officials felt at that time, because I got to know a lot of them from, you know, that was the year I started riding the racer, going into 1982 when it went down again, and then 1983 when it was, you know, finally done. But yeah, I mean, it's a pain point, especially when it is the centerpiece of your marketing plan for the year.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I've had people, especially on like KI Central and stuff, who live, in the Columbus market or north of there, saying they're seeing Cedar Point commercials, advertising Top Thrill too, which is kind of funny because in this day and age more than ever, you could pivot on that. You could have some sort of backup or whatever, but um usually the news gets out and it is on their website. But I would argue, this might be a hot take, but I think, and the bat was before I was born, but I think the bat thing was probably worse than this, because I feel like not just coaster enthusiasts knowing the situation with this, but the general public knowing the problems that Top Thrill Dragster had. I feel like this is not, like, it would have been a pleasant surprise for this to run well. And the fact that it's having this closure is something that people are kind of used to. Well, granted, like, they didn't have social media and yada, 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 all with that. But with the bat, I could see the average person saying, you just built this thing. How's it not work? Like, is it safe?
Well, back then too, there wasn't social media. There weren't fan sites, none of those kind of things. So, unless you saw it on the news or read it in the newspaper, you had no idea. There wasn't any other way to communicate that, and then you would have your, the American Coaster Enthusiasts with their newsletter that came out like quarterly at that time. So maybe 3 months later, it's talking about the bat being down, and by that time it's open. So there wasn't the scrutiny on it that Cedar Point is facing today.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the listener question. I think I'm going to read this first one, but this one's from Jerry W. from Indianapolis. He asks, I saw Don at Holiday World recently. Life is full of tough choices, so I've got to ask, which is better, the Beast at Kings Island or the Voyage at Holiday World?
Well, that is a tough choice. I think with the Beast, I've been with that since 1979 when it debuted. That was my first really big, outside the racer was my first ever roller coaster ride, but that first big wow moment was the Beast, when you knew that you were riding something really special.
Yeah.
So a lot of years, 45 years with the Beast. Now, I've ridden the Voyage every year, since it opened, except for the COVID year. Love my rides on it. But I got to tell you, with the track work that was done over the winter and the way it's running this year, I mean, it's running fantastic. And, after my rides on it this year, I mean, the two words that keep coming to mind, after the ride ends is just, holy cow, what did I just experience? I would give the Voyage, right now, the Voyage, gets the edge for me over the Beast. Just the way it's running, based on my experience with it, this year, it's the most incredible wooden roller coaster experience that I've ever been on my rides this year.
Yeah. So, but the thing though is, when you ask which one is better, that might be a loaded question too, because as far as
They're
a
different
ride
rides.
experience,
Yeah, 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 they're different.
yeah. So
Different kind
my
of
thought
ride.
is, the Voyage is probably, if you want the G forces and stuff like that, that's certainly the better ride, especially now when it's kind of smooth. But you get this a little bit with the Voyage, but the Beast has the better, like, roaming around the woods kind of feel. Because the Voyage, if the Voyage was in a wooded area, it would hands
Oh, it
down
is
be.
in a wood. It is pretty much, a lot of it's in the wooded area that you're going through. So I would say the better ride. I mean, it's like saying what's the better car. I mean, the better roller coaster. It's the Voyage. It's and as associated as I am, and tied in, with Kings Island and the Beast and all the nostalgia and everything, that's not an easy thing for me to say.
Yeah, that is a good question though, and it's certainly up for debate. I think most people. What's funny, I've noticed this about Disney people, especially because Disney people that like are local to Disney World think Disneyland is so much better and it's got so many better attractions. And the people who live in like the Anaheim area all think like, dude, Disney World is so big and there's 4 parks and 2 water parks. So I feel like the people, especially the enthusiasts that live like where Kings Island's their home park, they're like, they've got the better ride. Like, everyone's always got that grass is always greener thing. Um, but for me, it's like, yes, I think as far from a thrill standpoint, the Voyage is hands down the better ride.
Yeah, I mean, you rode
But
it earlier this year with me.
I did, yeah, and that was obviously not my first time riding it, but um, but what makes the Beast a great ride isn't necessarily a thrill factor. It's the Lost in the Woods thing, being so disconnected from the rest of the park. And I think it has the edge on the Voyage from that standpoint. But if you're just asking which one's the better ride, then yes, the Voyage. But I think like which one's the better package is a little bit more debatable.
Well, let's
But
leave it in the it's if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Which one do you think is the better ride, the Beast at Kings Island or the Voyage at Holiday World? But
and
great
why?
question. Very difficult for me to choose, especially with all the years of investment I have, in the Beast. But I've been blown away by my rides on the Voyage this year.
Yeah, the cool part is like you got things like Mystic Timbers where it's far more intense than any other wooden coaster. But you're also sitting in the middle of completely different technology. The trains are different, the track is different, everything else. The Voyage uses PTC trains, and it's got some of that precision cut vertical track from the Gravity Group and so on, but you can't tell that doesn't feel any different. It just feels smoother and newer, so it's not like Titan track or anything. So it gives you an aggressive modern experience in the shape of like a traditional wooden coaster. But I agree. Thanks for the question, Jerry. I'm going to read the next one too, because my answer is no. But so from Russ J from the Lone Star State asked, did either of you ride the Texas Cyclone at the defunct Astroworld? And if so, what were your thoughts? So as I said, I never went to Astroworld. I imagine you did though.
I did. I missed the golden years for the Texas Cyclone. When it debuted in 1976, it was acclaimed the world's best wooden roller coaster.
Hmm.
It was modeled after the Coney Island Cyclone,
Yeah.
in New York, and just rave reviews about it. I remember reading a lot of newspaper, articles about it and magazine articles about the Texas Cyclone. When I became interested in roller coasters after riding the Racer for the first time in 1972, that was on my bucket list. I got to get to Six Flags over Texas, and I've got to ride the Texas Cyclone. Well, I finally got there in 1990, but by that time, it was just a shell of what it had been. It had been reprofiled, different parts of the track. They had changed from the PTC trains to Morgan trains because people could reach out and touch the structure. They had these like big like wings on the side, so you couldn't reach your hands out. It was like riding in a coffin car. It just wasn't the best ride experience. So based on what I had read, what it was, and talking to people who had ridden it in the 70s and the 80s, to what I experienced, a little bit, disappointing there that not that it was a terrible ride, but that I didn't get to experience the glory years of it. And then I went back, several years later and rode it different times when I would be in that Houston area when I was working for hockey teams, and between games and that I would, head over to Astroworld if we were playing there in the early fall or the spring to ride it. Good ride, but I never got to ride it when it was a great ride.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I never went to Astroworld. I actually watched a documentary on it on YouTube, and it seems like they had pretty lofty goals for it, and a really creative experience, and that sort of fell apart. But yeah, so Russ, thanks for the question. Make sure that you follow us on all your favorite podcast apps: Apple, Google, Spotify. You know the drill. Follow us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. And then leave a comment. Remember, Voyage or Beast and why. But we'll see you next week on the Attractions Group podcast.